Welcome back, my beautiful friends. I'm so excited that you are here for another episode of I Was Born to Do This, a podcast for leaders who feel as though they were born to do what they are doing right here, right now, of authors, of speakers, of entrepreneurs, change makers, true, authentic leaders. And today we have an extraordinary leader. I'm really, really excited to introduce you to her. She has been on my show before, and we are so happy to have her back. Angel Lyn, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Kira.
So exciting. You, my friend, are here for a very special reason. And why don't you just tell everyone, why are you here today?
I'm here because after many, many years of dreaming about being an author, ever since I was 11 years old, I am officially an author. And my book came out in December, Soul-U-lar Evolution, a Mormon woman's transcendent journey to love.
Mm.
And it was thanks to Kira and her beautiful vision that aligned with mine. I was journaling my story for several years, and I was afraid to approach any publisher. I thought, who's going to want to publish a book in the genre of consciousness and spirituality? And the very first conversation I had with you, Kira, you said, I publish books in the genre of consciousness and spirituality. I was like, oh, oh my gosh, that's a thing? Oh, good.
Oh, it
Yeah,
was.
it so is. There's a big readership out there for this genre. Now I know that, but at the time I thought maybe this is just too out there.
No. And it birthed at the perfect time. And I just want to honor you because I know what it takes, right? Like I just wrote a book and I'm like, whew, I forgot. I forgot. Like,
It's
it,
like having a baby. You always say that, and you're right. There's so many metaphors, you know? When you think you want to have another one and then you have a baby and you're like, "Oh, I forgot about all the aches and pains and how long this is." And like, yeah, so
yeah,
similar.
yeah, really is. So I just honor you because I know the path it took to get this book here. And I'm so excited for you to dive in with us. So before we do, even though if someone's a regular listener, they know you because you've been on before. If someone's new, why don't you share with them who you are and what you do in the world?
I am a born again non-therapist.
Mhm.
So I have MSW degree. 20 years ago, I went into the clinical mental health field to work as a therapist, and in a very short time, I felt a lot of dissonance, like discord in my being that just said, this is not the place for me. And I was confused because I had felt so pulled into a helping profession. But I pulled out of there and began to wander looking for what was I to do with this degree in human behavior and psychology I was so passionate about. But the spiritual elements is what I was looking for. And so I now operate as a life coach, and I'm referred to as a soul mentor. I'm really a guide rather than being a guru or a teacher or a master of some kind that is here to tell you how to improve your life. My specialty is guiding people to reconnecting to their true and authentic soul, their essence.
Mm.
Some call it their higher self, your spirit. Most of us have been systematically disconnected from that part of ourselves by listening to external voices of authority
Mm.
that tell us every move to make in our life and what we have to do and should do and need to do and ought to do. And so we begin to adopt those voices and they become like our own. We regurgitate messages, things we've heard from childhood on up. And my job is to get people to get still and to begin to connect to their bodies, their hearts, and then their soul. And we have to drop out of our heads. Most of us live in the head where these messages are just on autopilot and repeat of what we think we have to do. So I'm a guide and I help people reconnect. And it's very much like being an orchestra conductor, I think, because when you're in, if anyone's been in a band or orchestra or had a music teacher, they hold the tone. They'll come around section by section to the instruments and they'll give you a pitch. And each musician tunes their instrument to the pitch. So I call what I do tuning your frequency to truth.
Mm.
Because when we have this dissonance or discord, when there's not peace or joy or love or freedom or light in our being, we are out of tune with the frequency of truth. So I just help people tune that frequency, and we take a look at what's going on in the mind, in the body, in the heart, and then I believe everyone's soul has perfect pitch. So it's really coming home and being able to open up your spiritual ears to hear that pitch coming from within. And that's how you find the answers that you're looking for. They're within you.
I love that. And we both hold that so dear. That's really such a dear truth in my body. And I know that those who are listening, if they've been listening for a while, this is a conversation of like, listen to the body. Listen to the body. What is the body actually saying? And yours is even deeper of like listening to the soul. And so tell me, how did you find this? Because when you say that, tuning to the frequency of truth, that's not something that just like stumbled in one day while you were doing dishes. Like, what led you to this awareness, this knowingness?
I was living in the exact opposite. I was totally out of tune, and yet I was very religiously practicing rituals of obedience and everything I could be and do to be a great mom, a good wife. I was just doing all the things I had been raised to do, and I was exhausted. I had Hashimoto's, chronically elevated cortisol levels, stage 2 adrenal fatigue. So my health was failing, even though I was trying to be nutritious, I was trying to work out, I was running marathons, but it was like every area of my life, whether it was the parenting, the marriage, or my own health, I felt like I was failing, even though I was working so dang hard at those, like researching, reading books, trying to follow other people's prescribed programs and patterns to be healthy and happy.
Yeah.
And then back in 2016, had a very interesting experience when I got a phone call that there was a warrant out for my husband's arrest. So all of a sudden, I had a situation that was unexpected and I was not prepared for, on top of already having a struggling marriage, feeling like I was failing as a mom because I was tired. I wasn't as ambitious. I didn't feel like I was a fun mom. I was often ornery. I was quick to anger. I was resentful and condescending in my marriage. Like all of these emotions and depressed waves of depression would come in, and then I would fight my way out of it. If I just exercise harder, if I just read my scriptures more, if I just do more, it's gonna go. It's gonna, leave me. But then when this information came into my life, I remember walking into my bedroom to look at my resource library. I had all kinds of self-help books and religious books, and I scanned the shelf and I was like, there is not one chapter or verse that says what to do when there's a warrant out for your husband's arrest. So I had been used to going to resource materials, tell me how to do this phase of my life. And in that moment, there was nothing. And that's when I pivoted. For the first time in my life, I just stopped and realized I've only got me. It was such a shock to realize that my partner was not the person I could turn to in this moment. And I wasn't even sure what was going on. So I didn't want to reach out to any other human. I didn't want to spread gossip because I didn't even know. I didn't know what was happening. And so I just remember standing there, and for the first time in my adult life, I reconnected to the part of me that I call my soul that led me around as a child. It was like, oh, there you are. Like I remembered her, but it had been so long since I got still enough or even tried to look in and be like, what are we doing today? But as I did so, I could remember being so little, and she ran the show. Like she was just so outgoing and so confident and so happy and so all these things that I had forgotten about. And I just said, look, girl, it's you and me. And I need to know what to do next. And then I said, God, if there is a God, in that moment, everything seemed upside down. And so there was that question, God, if there is a God, what do I do next? And I got the thought to put chicken in the crock pot. That was the first thought that came into my mind. And of course, it seemed ridiculous concerning the heavy circumstances. What in the heck does chicken in the crock pot have to do with this crisis I'm in? But in that moment, it was like all of the fallacies I had lived they just pushed out of the way. They parted. And
Mm.
I understood something. Either I am divinely created by a creator that I can connect to, or I'm not. So why don't you experiment with the possibility that you just ask a question and the answer that came wasn't what you expected, and it seems totally backwards, but what if God's mind is not your mind? Like, what's it going to hurt to just trust it? I realized that I had been praying for 38 years of my life. And when answers that didn't make sense came in like that, I would discard them and go back to praying. I would try again. So in this moment, I pivoted and I decided to just listen. And I went in and I put chicken in the crock pot. And as I was doing it, I remembered I had 5 kids that needed to eat that day and that I was in shock and I was having an existential crisis. So that was the best advice that could have ever come to me. It was a very practical piece. And I began to simply do that one day at a time. I went in here. I didn't go to a manual, a book. I didn't go to a podcast. I didn't go to a webinar. I just got still in a quiet space and I took my questions into my being. So it was like I was asking my inner knowing, the best I can describe, not my head that wants to constantly give me the answer from someone else. It was like into my being. And I close my eyes and I picture my soul. I actually say, show me my spirit. And I give myself a chance to settle into an image of light and a feeling of love. And then I ask questions. And day by day, I began getting really clear answers, asking, breathing, and receiving. Just taking that pause, that was another pivot point of to not just rush off like, oh yeah, I know what this means, and take it and think I could tackle it. It was like, no, let me sit with this for a moment without interpreting the answer and just fully receive it and acknowledge with the breath I receive, that I would trust that I am divinely connected to the creator. And then step number 4, I would act with courage. And I was told to do things that I'd never thought of before, that were out of character, that sometimes were socially awkward or uncomfortable, like to go hug people that I didn't really want to. I wasn't a hugger. I mean, just random things that I had never thought of, but I began to notice every time I got still and asked a question, a thought would come. And if I would try it on in my mind often would resist it. But when I'd notice, what does that thought do to my body would relax. What does that thought do to my heart? My heart feels love and peace. And so I would act on it. And miracles began to happen in my life that are all in this book.
I love this. I always love listening to you because it's just such a powerful reminder. Because this is the one thing I find as humans we forget the most. No matter how many times we hear this, no matter how many times we experience it. I mean, the children of Israel watched the Red Sea part and they still doubted afterwards.
Yes.
It's like to be human, right?
Mm.
So I love when you speak, and it's just this reminder to our souls, even if this is new information for someone listening, your soul knows this truth. And so it's a reminder to the soul. And so I love when you share this. I would love for you to take your book and I want you to just open it to whatever page it lands on. And I want you to share with us whatever that concept story is right there.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, this is fun. Well, this is page 96, and it's probably one of my most favorite experiences.
Perfect.
So this is a story. Should I just tell it?
Yes, please.
Okay. This is a story where I was really wrestling with following the inspirations that were coming, because quite often they were different from the crowd control concepts that I had been learning in my religion, that I'd been raised with in my society. So it was like, if I listen to what you're telling me, I'm going to go against the grain. And in a moment of nervousness, because I was led to separate from my husband, and that was the thing I was most scared about. It was so taboo for me to separate and to be leading towards a divorce. And so I was pleading with the spirit of truth. Like, is this the right thing? I'm afraid I'm making the wrong decision. And all of a sudden I had a vision. So this story in the book, I'm going to read a little bit. In answer, God gave me a vision. I was standing on the sidelines of the streets of Jerusalem in a large crowd. I had a pair of pom-poms in my hands. Jesus entered the street with an entourage. There were all kinds of shouts going up towards him. I lifted my pom-poms in the air and I was cheering, "Go, Jesus! Go, Jesus!" As the procession reached me, Jesus stopped and looked at me. He said, "Drop the pom-poms. Come, follow me." I did as I was told, and I stepped out into the street, walking several feet behind Jesus. Then I noticed not everyone was cheering in favor of Jesus. A rock hit him, and then I noticed it hit me. People were spitting on him, and sometimes they missed and it landed on me. I heard crude and vulgar terms shouted out at him, and my head dropped. I looked down at the ground in shame. So many voices, so many different opinions, both of praise and of condemnation. The longer I walked in his steps, the more I understood neither approval nor disapproval had any effect on his worth. The opinions of men were not a reflection of him in any way. They were a reflection of them. He attached to nothing because he knew exactly who he was and what guided him. Following Jesus in this vision allowed me to notice the disparity between his consistent emanation of love and my reactions to all the cruel, unkind, hurtful words and gestures being thrown his way and mine. I felt sadness, but my awareness would bounce back and forth between my sadness and his joy. As I continued to walk behind him, what I realized is how the love of Christ transmutes all judgment, that he fully beheld the people on the sidelines. And as I was walking behind him in this vision, I could too. I could see the fears that precipitated their anger, their mocking, their ignorance. And as he saw them as innocent, I was able to see them as innocent.
Oh.
But when we got to the end, Jesus said to me, because I was afraid of the persecutions, and Jesus said to me, "If you are persecuted in my sake, you are in good company." And that's when my motto became, "I will dance in your persecution." I don't need anyone's approval or agreement or understanding with how I choose to live my life. That's between me and God. And as I let that go, the Spirit showed me that I had been worshiping the idol of my reputation. When I lived in fear of judgment and I tried to conform to the crowd and fit in and do what everyone else thought was right and true, I was worshiping the idol of my reputation. That was my God above gods. And this experience showed me what it meant to be like Christ, to really be like Christ. It was a powerful vision that forever changed my heart and attitude and gave me the courage to trust God above man always.
Mm. Mm. What a beautiful, beautiful vision. And what I love about it is that we always learn best through stories. So if you had just told the story of like, don't let your reputation be your God, we're like, cool, got it. But then you tell that vision and it's like, oh, I get it. I understand this. I feel where I've done this. I see how I can be strong enough to not do it. That's what's so powerful about that. I love that you landed on that. Let's do that one more round. Let's do it again.
I don't know. Can I be lucky twice?
I've never done this before. This is super fun. I love it. Let's see where the Wheel of Fortune will take us today.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I have no idea what this is about. One particular experience presented a learning opportunity. I was genuinely interested in a guy I was dating. Oh, this is when after my divorce. And the Spirit told me to get on the app, a dating app. And I was like, wait a minute. I thought I was just going to focus on taking care of myself as a single mom and taking care of my children. I have 5 sons. Yeah. And so then this was one Sunday after I had been divorced. The Spirit literally just said, get on an online app. I had never done that before. Yeah. And I've been married 16 years, so apps didn't exist. Yeah. So here it is. One particular experience presented a learning opportunity. I was genuinely interested in a guy I was dating, and then our contact abruptly ended. I spiraled in shame, facing all my fears about not being enough, not being lovable, and not being worthy. It felt like a volcano erupted from within me. with fear, shame, and sadness pouring out as a hot rage. I went to my storage room, grabbed a bat, and found things I could smash while I raged. I shouted and destroyed cardboard boxes until the rage melted into tears. Sobs and groans and moans came from my lips. I had to keep coaching myself through the experience so that judgment would not shut me down. And there's a footnote that says, yes, this emotional outburst was conscious and intentional. And then I talk more about it in chapter 10 of how I choose to lean into my emotions and feel them and move them with movement and sound instead of stuffing them, because I had been trained, or I should say programmed, in our society to avoid, escape, numb, and distract from my emotions. And when I did that, it leads to addictions, like addictions to food, addictions to sleep, numbing out on social media. But in this particular situation, I was so scared to date again because I had never been asked out as a teen. I didn't date a lot. And so I thought, who's going to date a 40-year-old woman with 5 kids? And then I started dating. I had this really fun connection. And then all of a sudden I was ghosted. And so that was this night when I went into this storage room and I was like, ooh, this is a beautiful trigger. And triggers are portals to truth. So rather than project and blame and make up a story about what a rotten human this guy was and how he led me on, I went in to feel my feelings, express them, and move them. And then I got to the answer. When I had exhausted my emotions through expression, I was still. There's the magic in all things. Be still and know that I'm God. So it's every time I come back to that stillness, I'm able to come to the eye of the storm. And that's where communion with God is for me. I say it was like the ocean after a storm. Then I turned inward and upward. That's when I go to my soul and then I go to God. I call it going inward and upward. I said, okay, God, here I am. I did what you asked, and here's what I've experienced. I've been telling myself tonight that I'm not good enough, that this ended because I'm not skinny enough, not pretty enough, not lovable, not worthy. Those were all of my limiting core beliefs from being a teenager. And so they surfaced. And why do they surface? Because they are not yet healed. I love this so much that a situation, a simple date with another person that didn't go the way I hoped, brought things to the surface that lived like spiritual cancer in my being, eating away at me on the unconscious level. I know these are old stories of captivity, I said. Remind me what is true about me. As I chose to suspend the old stories and seek to know the truth, glorious streams of light energy entered the room and permeated my body through the top of my head, filling me with truth. It felt like a rapid battery recharge, like I had just plugged into some accelerated charger and was fully rebooted within a couple of minutes. It was an authentic, nearly instantaneous shift from my feelings of rejection to absolute light and freedom. I was instructed by the Spirit to get back onto that dating app and go at it again. My ego told me I was a glutton for punishment, but my soul assured me I could trust the divine. I did. And the very next day, I matched with Eric on the dating app called Tinder. That's why I call him my Tinder Mercy.
Ah!
Eric and I have been together for 5 years, and I call him King Eric, and he calls me Queen and Goddess. It was an absolute miracle that if I hadn't known how to feel my emotions and witness myself, and then move into the question, what is true, I don't think that I would have been in a place to attract someone at that same frequency. I could have stayed in the story. I hate men. Men only want one thing. He ghosted me because I wouldn't do this or wasn't that. Like all of that negativity. And that's how the old me used to operate. Always in projection. My ego trying to make herself think she was right and judging everyone. Always in judgment. And this shift, the Spirit taught me to look inward and use every moment as an opportunity to cleanse the inner vessel and to tune myself to the frequencies of truth and unconditional love.
Oh, I love this game. Wheel of Fortune with your book.
You're lucky. I'm like, whew. But when I work with you, Kira, we can always count on the divine. My human self is like, I don't know. I don't know about this game. And I'm like, I'm just going to trust because that's how you roll. That's how we roll. When we get outside of ourselves, we can just trust.
Oh, it's so beautiful. It's so every piece of that. I just want to acknowledge how much I love it. Like the following, right? The hearing, like get on this dating app, and then going through the experience, and then knowing that it was for you. Instead of being angry and frustrated that this man ghosted, it was like, no, this is for me. And then moving through feeling it all so that it doesn't get suppressed and stuck within the spaces of our bodies. Like it's just so beautiful. And then it paved the way for Eric.
King Eric.
Well, hell, that's a great story.
Oh, and that's going to be in the next book, Soul-U-lar Relationships.
Mm.
There's so much there in meeting King Eric. And I just want to say one quick thing that's funny too. I didn't write this in the book. There's so many little tidbits that weren't included. But if you've ever used an app, anyone listening, for dating, Tinder is one where you swipe left if you want to get rid of them and discard them, and you swipe right if you're interested. Yeah. Well, my kids were looking at it and they're like, Mom, not another old, bald, and bearded guy. And I was like, guys, come on, boys. They have these handsome Polynesian sons. And so they wanted me to find a brown guy to date, and here's this white redneck. And I was like, okay. And I almost swiped him left. And then the spirit said, stop. And I pulled it back down and I just looked at the pictures and I said, why? What, spirit? And the spirit said to me, lovable. And I just looked at his eyes. And then here's the really strange thing: meet him and put your hand on his face. And I was shown just like that. I was like, well, we'll see if he'll let me meet him. So I swipe right, and within 24 hours, I get a notification. It's a match. And that is supposed to mean that he had seen me and swiped right, showing interest. And then you're connected and you're allowed to communicate. Well, lo and behold, we met, and come to find out, he had never seen my profile. He got my message, hey, tell me more about you. And he was like, who is this? Well, we didn't know it for a couple of weeks, but our grandmothers were best friends 80 years ago.
What?
And they lived in a small town in Nevada.
No.
And they were, and here we are in Southern Utah. We met in St. George. Like, we thought we were, going online, that we'd reach way out of our networks. And Eric's mom gave me a letter that my grandmother wrote to his grandmother on her wedding day with marriage advice, and a quilt block that my grandmother stitched 88 years ago to be part of the bride's wedding blanket. And that was such a miracle. And so when I met Eric on our very first date, we're talking, we're face to face, a couple hours being together. And I'm standing there and I'm just remembering my commitment to the spirit. Put your hand on his face, put your hand on his face. Okay, friends, like, this is one of those moments. I have thousands of these where it doesn't make sense. And I'm going to tell you, the spirit doesn't make sense to mortals. Why? Because we can't see all things. We have no idea. All I know is that when I committed in 2016 to continually tune my frequency to truth, I decided that courage and commitment were all there is. Like fear, I'll feel it and I'll notice it and I'll go, okay, you're afraid. This sounds stupid. He might think you're weird, whatever. My commitment is to listening to the divine. And if this guy walks away because I listen to the divine, so be it. So I said to him, I have a request. Can I put my hand on your face? And he was like, okay, with kind of a slight hesitation. And he's bald and bearded. And I just put my hand the way the vision had showed me. And as I did, tears began to well up in his eyes. And we stared at each other in the eyes for a minute. I had nothing to say because I was going inward and upward. What do I do now? And it said, just hold it there. And in a moment, I asked him, what are you feeling? And he said, that's so interesting. My face has always been my hot button. People can mess with me. They can push me around. But if they touch my face, I'm going to knock them to the ground. It has always been a place that has been a heated spot for me. And he says, when you touched me, I felt that I knew you. Like, I knew you. You are who I've been looking for my whole life.
Oh my gosh.
You can't make this stuff up.
Oh.
If I had lived by the natural man ego, I would have swiped left because it's not the thing I think I'm looking for. I would have said, no way am I going to do something that weird on a first date, all of those things. And I have just learned that life is incredible when you learn to trust your own soul and the voice within, and listen and act with courage and commitment.
That's the best story ever. I'm loving this. This is like popcorn and heat blanket podcast. I'm loving it. This is so good. And these are the stories that must be told. And to you and me, we
Mhm.
live these lives all day,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yep.
sometimes we forget that these stories are as magical as they are because we live and breathe this every single day.
Hmm.
But these are the stories that must be told because miracles are contagious. I believe it.
I love that line.
I came to me one day. It was like miracles are contagious. So if we share a miracle, it becomes contagious and someone else believes that they can have a miracle.
Mhm.
And I feel like that is how this process that you live life by of hearing, receiving, and doing, this is it's the alchemy of miracles. It's how we get to become miracle workers. And
Yes.
the whole book is this. So everyone who's listening, obviously you need to go get her book. It's going to be in our show notes. And I feel like there's one more thing. We've kind of hit our time, but I'm just saying that's fine. Um, because I feel like I can feel one more little strand coming in. So I want you to close your eyes and I want you to drop into your heart and I want you to listen. It's like this little golden strand
Mhm.
coming down from the heavens. What is that? What does this represent for you?
It's the what and where principle of co-creating miracles with God. So something that I was led to discover is that when I started asking, what would you have me do? And it started with go put chicken in the crock pot, and I acted. Then I was living that pattern every day. I was just, what do I do now? Where do I go? If I said, what do I do now? And the answer came and it eclipsed my knowledge, that's where okay, where do I go to find the people that can explain this to me, the resources that I need, the knowledge, the skills, the money. So I was just following this what and where pattern for 3 months. And till one day I said, what do I do now? And it was, now is the time to tell your husband to get out, that you're filing for divorce. And I did that with much resistance and fear for a moment. But when I finally committed, then the next thing was, what do I do now? I don't know how to be a single mom. And the spirit said, go to a natural place, leave town. You need to go into nature and you need to be by yourself and come closer, spend more time communing with me. And I said, okay, where do I go? And within a couple of days, someone reached out to me, a good friend, and said, I just bought a home in Maui. Why don't you come visit me? Again, there I was with my pom poms. Go Jesus. Like, Maui is a great place to go. That sounded wonderful. And I got online, and the tickets were $590 round trip. And immediately I sunk into fear. I'm a single mom with no income and nothing in savings. I am donating plasma. I've just asked, I'm on food stamps. I've just asked my bishop for help. How on earth could I do this? And as soon as I did that, the channel of communication I'd been experiencing for 3 months cut off so rapidly that it felt like a steel door had shut and I was in a cellar. Like it was cold. There was an actual change in sensation. And I said, what just happened? And the spirit showed me, you went into fear. You have been following the what and the where consistently for months, and you got the answer to what you're supposed to do and where you're supposed to go, and you went into fear and you stopped the process. Well, it's because I don't know how. I don't know how I'm going to make this happen. And the spirit said, that's not your business. So in that moment, I simply, without knowing what was on the other side, I acknowledged and I repented of my fear. And as I did so, I realized this is all that needs to ever happen. The moment I repent of fear or acknowledge it and cast it off is the moment I'm back in tune with truth. So as I did that, I just said, I now acknowledge that you told me what you want me to do and where to go, and I will trust that that is true, and I will move forward with an open heart and mind that that is what's happening. And the very next day, I received a letter in the mail. It was a check from a commercial car company that I had been running a shuttle company. And I thought it was a bill, and I opened it up, and it was a letter that said, you overpaid in the last quarter. Here is a reimbursement check for $590.
I love this. Oh my
I,
God.
I was like, this is like stuff you hear on stage when motivational speakers tell things, like this is a miracle. It was the exact dollar amount of a trip to Maui. And I immediately deposited it and I went. I had no idea. Not only was that 2 weeks in Maui extremely centering for me to realize the next steps in my life, that turned into a trip where 8 months later, because while I was there, I said, oh, what do I do with this? Like there was so much power and healing that came. What do you want me to do next? And the follow-up was bring women with you. And 8 months later, I was back in Hawaii with 50 women having my first women's retreat and teaching them healing practices of the islands and of connecting to the divine. And from that, I could go on, but the connections and the relationships from those 50 women, there literally has been life-saving exchanges, the donation of organs one to another through people who met at that group. And this is like stuff that in that moment, when I was in my moment of pain, I don't know how to be a single mom. Everything's pressing in on me. I have no money, no resources. What do you want me to do? I listen. I want you to go to nature. Where do I go? I want you to go to Maui. So I discovered, and I call it the what and where principle of co-creating miracles with God, that if I stay in my domain, it's to ask, what do you want me to do? Where do I go? I leave to God the domain of delivering the how and explaining or revealing the why after the experience. And as long as I don't go to God with how and why questions, which are inherently fearful and doubtful, if you feel into them, when we go to the divine with like, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to solve this problem? How am I going to, whatever it is, how am I going to parent better? Any how question, there's an element of doubt, right? Can you feel that? It's not the same language as truth. So we can't connect if I'm approaching the divine with fear and doubt. So I stay with what and where. Those are such trusting, faithful questions. They're the questions of discipleship. Show me, tell me what, and show me where, and I'll do it. And once I lived that principle and could articulate it, this is the pattern I'm living. We co-created miracles. I did my part. God delivered the how and the why. It was so far beyond me. A reimbursement check. Who would have thought that would just come in the mail with no work? It was flow with grace and ease. The more I do that, the more I have found in the scriptures. That's the exact pattern that is there in every miracle. I just had never heard it laid out like that before, but I started looking at all of these different times where people just did what they were told and went where they were told to go. And it was like the red carpet's laid out, the how was delivered. And then even sometimes generations later, the why is explained. It always doesn't show up, but we're so used to going to God with those questions in prayer, how and why.
Yeah. Oh, I love that story. I'm so happy that that's what we ended on. This golden thread. I hope everyone listening right now that this woke up faith in you, hope for miracles, hope for being guided, and the trust that everything is actually working out for you. Like even in your hardest days, there is some sort of recipe where that is a part of the end result. And so I honor you for being this author, this leader, this speaker, this human being in the world, Angel. And I'm honored to know you. I'm honored that we were able to publish your book. And how can people follow you, learn more about you? Give a little snippet right here.
AngelLyn.com. So that's ANGELLYN.com. You can go on there and get a free video from me on the simple 4-step process to forgiveness. I have groups online, a 12-week group coming up, and groups in person here in St. George, but you can also just find my contact there, reach out to me if I can be of service. I'd love for anyone to start by reading the book to see if the principles that I share resonate. And if they do, then there's opportunities to work with me one-on-one or groups or come to retreats. And I just want to say thank you, Kira. You are one of the most greatest manifestations of miracles in my life. Our meeting and the first time I saw your face and heard you speak the language that I had been learning to live by the Spirit. I knew it just made sense. Like you say, we live this every day, but it's not common. So to find someone like you who was publishing books of all things, it's like exactly what I needed. You will forever live in my heart as the catalyst that helped me finish this project. And I really want to say thank you to Rachel Skousen and Jamie Borup of Styles Guide Editing. They too not only edited my book, but they held space for me emotionally when I wanted to bury it and I wanted to dig a hole and hide in shame. Say, I can't do this. I can't put myself out there to the firing squad of judgment. And those ladies have so much more than just writing skills. They have the emotional capacity to help authors get through things. So I love them. And Elle Gunter, who did the design, I think it's so beautiful what she came up with. And there's a description inside of what she gleaned from this book. It's so beautifully done. So thank you to my support team.
Yeah.
All of you made this happen. And I'm just grateful that I fulfilled my childhood dream of becoming an author. Thank you, Kira.
You're very welcome. And it's just the beginning. It's just the beginning, as books are. They're just beginnings. They're new pathways that get unleashed underneath our feet. And I just can't wait to see where this takes you. And it just lights me up. So as we end, I love to have my author, even though we've been doing this the whole time, but if you want to drop in your heart and just ask, what is one last final message you could give everyone today? What would that message be?
Tuning your frequency to truth is so simple. You are worthy right now. You are enough right now. You are loved. If you will get still and spend time talking, just asking questions to your soul, your ego will begin to unravel and peel away. Your ego is the one that tells you with the voice of an imposter that you're not enough, that you're not lovable, that you're not worthy. The things that cause us so much suffering. It is my wish and my passion and my mission to help my soul siblings everywhere I can to unravel the ego and to remember their soul, to connect there, to become their own best friend, and then to recognize and begin to commune with the Creator. That is where peace, light, love, joy, truth, and freedom exist.
So beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Yes. And as we end, let me see. My message today. Sometimes it may feel like there's a wall in front of you that you have to take apart one brick at a time. But oftentimes, if you ask, you will actually be shown the way around. There we go. All right, friends. Thank you for being here. Have the most beautiful, magical week.